Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today we're doing a deep dive into a subject that, well, it touches every single one of us. Why we struggle to break bad habits. You know the ones, right? Those behaviors that kind of sneak into our lives, the ones we know aren't serving us, but letting go feels incredibly, frustratingly difficult. It's a universal challenge.
It really is. And the material we're exploring today, it has some absolutely fascinating insight. It goes way beyond just, try harder or have more willpower.
Yeah.
It really digs into the foundational science, the deep-seated psychology, and the practical dynamics in the real world that make shedding unwanted behaviors such a persistent struggle.
That's a great way to put it. It helps us understand these invisible threads that weave through our daily existence, shaping our actions often without us even noticing. Some threads are strong and helpful, others create patterns we desperately want to escape. Our mission in this deep dive is to pull out the crucial insights, the surprising facts, and give you a practical, well-informed understanding of why these patterns are so incredibly sticky and what's truly going on beneath the surface.
Think of it as getting a shortcut, maybe, to decoding the mystery of those automatic actions we find ourselves doing, even when our conscious mind is, wishing we were doing something else entirely.
Okay, let's unpack this. The material starts by grounding us in the very nature of habits themselves, describing them as these invisible threads woven into the fabric of our daily lives. It highlights just how deeply ingrained these routines become, shaping pretty much everything we do from the moment we wake up until we go to bed, and often, like you said, unfolding without much conscious thought at all.
That observation resonates so strongly, because it's true for everyone, isn't it? The way we make our morning coffee, that automatic reach for our phone first thing, or grabbing a specific snack when we're feeling stressed. These aren't typically deliberate moment-by-moment decisions. They are, as this exploration puts it, part of the essential scaffolding of our existence. They provide structure, predictability, and a sense of ease.
And while some of that scaffolding is perfectly functional, supporting positive routines like brushing your teeth, maybe exercising, having efficient work practices, the material is quick to pivot to the fact that not all habits are beneficial. Bad habits, the ones we struggle with, can actively chip away at our well-being, derail our most important goals, and trap us in cycles of frustration. It names familiar culprits. Smoking, overeating, procrastination, maybe too much screen time, even that persistent negative self-talk. These are behaviors we know are harmful, yet they persist.
And that really brings us to the central, compelling question this deep dive grapples with. Given that we understand these behaviors are detrimental, why on earth is it so incredibly hard to break free from them? If it were simply a matter of knowing better, well, everyone would shed their unwanted habits instantly, wouldn't they?
Right. You'd think logic would be enough. But the material makes it abundantly clear that the answer is anything but simple. It's a complex interplay of forces. Our fundamental biology, deep-seated psychological patterns, the constant influence of our environment, and even the broader societal context we live in. It turns out our brains are wired in ways that, while efficient for survival, often prioritize immediate gratification over long-term consequences. That kind of sets us up for this exact struggle.
Add to that the psychological barriers. It details those subtle but powerful cognitive biases that distort our perception and the pervasive emotional triggers that many habits are designed to soothe. You see how the mind itself can work against our best intentions.
And then there are the external factors. Our physical surroundings, with all their embedded cues and the social pressures from the people around us, can make breaking familiar routines feel like swimming against a very strong current. The material also touches on practical challenges, like not having clear plans or relying too heavily on willpower, which this research suggests is a finite resource. These all contribute to the difficulty.
So to truly grasp why this struggle is so intense, we need to understand the core mechanism. The material defines a habit fundamentally as an automatic behavior that emerges through repetition. It's reliably triggered by specific cues, and critically, it's maintained because it's reinforced by some form of reward.
This brings us to the now famous three-part loop structure that the research highlights, building on pioneering work in habit science. There's the cue, which is the trigger. This could be something external and obvious, like seeing a notification pop up on your phone, or something more internal, like feeling a certain emotion, stress, boredom, anxiety, you name it.
Then comes the routine. This is the actual behavior or action you perform in response to that cue. So, if the cue is the phone notification, the routine is picking up the phone and opening the app. If the cue is stress, the routine might be reaching for a cigarette or heading to the fridge for a snack.
And completing the loop is the reward. This is the outcome, the benefit, or the feeling of satisfaction that you get immediately after performing the routine. It could be the brief hit of dopamine from scrolling social media, the momentary sense of calm that nicotine provides, or the immediate pleasure of sugar or fat from food. This reward is absolutely crucial because it's what reinforces the loop, telling your brain, okay, that was good, let's remember to do that again the next time we encounter this cue.
The material provides a vivid illustration using the smartphone example. Waking up in the morning can become the cue. The routine is automatically reaching for your phone, perhaps still half asleep, and starting to scroll through feeds or check messages. The reward is that quick burst of dopamine, the feeling of being connected, or maybe just the distraction from having to actually get out of bed. Over time, this sequence becomes so deeply ingrained that you perform the routine almost entirely on autopilot. It bypasses your conscious decision-making process. It just happens.
And the critical, often frustrating realization from the material is that bad habits operate on this exact same principle. The structure is identical. Using the smoking example again, a moment of stress becomes the cue. The routine is automatically reaching for and lighting a cigarette. The reward is the rapid delivery of nicotine, providing a temporary sense of calm or relief.
And here's where the power of the bad habit often overrides our best intentions. The immediate reward from that cigarette, the feeling of calm, is incredibly potent and instantaneous. It lands right away. This immediate gain frequently, often completely, overshadows the distant, less tangible costs, like the long-term health risks or the money being spent. Your brain is weighted towards that immediate, powerful, positive signal, making the loop incredibly resistant to disruption based solely on future consequences.
So, understanding this fundamental cue routine reward loop is paramount. As the material highlights, trying to break a bad habit effectively isn't just about stopping the behavior, it's about identifying and actively disrupting one or more of these key components in the loop. You need to know what is triggering the behavior and what underlying need or reward your brain is seeking to satisfy through that routine.
Which smoothly leads us to the next deep insight. The concept of automaticity itself. The defining characteristic of a habit is that it becomes an automatic behavior, something you perform with minimal conscious effort, almost effortlessly. The material explains that far from being a flaw, this is an incredible feature of our brains designed for efficiency.
And it's quite brilliant from an evolutionary standpoint. Automaticity is a fantastic way for the brain to conserve valuable mental energy. Think back to when you were first learning a complex skill, maybe driving a car or typing on a keyboard. It demanded intense focus, didn't it? Your prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain responsible for conscious thought, planning, and complex decision-making, was working incredibly hard.
Absolutely. But as you repeated the actions, the material explains, your brain gradually delegated these routine tasks to older, deeper structures, specifically the basal ganglia. This area is the brain's automatic processing unit. It learns sequences and actions and stores them as automatic programs. Once the behavior is handled by the basal ganglia, it frees up that higher-level prefrontal cortex to deal with novel situations, solve problems, or engage in more abstract thought without having to micromanage every little action.
This efficiency allows us to do things like drive a familiar route while simultaneously planning our day or have a conversation while performing routine tasks. But as the material wisely points out, this incredible efficiency is very much a double-edged sword. While it allows us to operate on autopilot in many beneficial ways, it also solidifies those bad habits, embedding them so deeply that they become incredibly resistant to conscious attempts at change.
And this is a key reason why automaticity makes breaking bad habits so frustratingly difficult. Because the behavior is handled by the basal ganglia, it often bypasses our conscious awareness. The material uses examples like mindless snacking or chronic procrastination. You often find yourself doing the thing before your conscious mind even fully registers what's happening. It's like your body initiates the program and your brain is left playing catch-up thinking, wait, did I just do that?
The power of this automaticity is particularly pronounced, according to the sources, when we're under pressure or feeling depleted. When our mental resources are low, perhaps due to stress, fatigue, or simply having too many things to juggle, what's sometimes called cognitive overload or ego depletion. Our conscious prefrontal cortex weakens, and we are far more likely to default to these well-worn automatic patterns, which, frustratingly, are often the harmful ones.
Consider the classic scenarios. Someone trying to quit smoking might automatically reach for a cigarette almost unconsciously during a particularly stressful argument at work. Or after an utterly draining day, instead of cooking a healthy meal, the automatic pattern might be ordering fast food or reaching for comfort junk food. When the deliberate decision-making part of your brain is tired, the automatic habit system takes over.
And bringing those automatic patterns back under conscious control, actively noticing the cue and the urge before you execute the routine is, as the material underscores, definitely a significant challenge, especially when your mental battery is running low.
So if the underlying mechanism of the cue routine reward loop and the development of automaticity are the same for both, what truly distinguishes a good habit from a bad one? The material offers a straightforward but crucial answer. It's defined by the outcomes.
Right. Good habits like sticking to an exercise routine, saving money consistently, or practicing mindful eating are behaviors that align with our long-term goals and contribute positively to our health, finances, mental clarity, or personal growth. They build towards the future we want.
Conversely, bad habits, while often providing some form of immediate reward or relief, come at a significant long-term cost. Smoking, compulsive online shopping, chronic procrastination, excessive gambling they might feel good, provide a temporary distraction, or soothe an uncomfortable feeling in the moment, but over time they erode our health, financial stability, relationships, or opportunities.
And the key insight here is that, mechanically speaking, the processes driving them are the same, that identical cue routine reward loop and the buildup of automaticity we just discussed. The label good or bad is applied purely based on whether the habit ultimately serves our well-being and long-term interests or actively undermines them.
And the primary challenge with the negative ones, as the material highlights, is that the immediate rewards, the pleasure, the comfort, the distraction, the relief, are incredibly powerful and reinforcing. They are right there, accessible now. In stark contrast, the costs, the health problems years down the line, the debt that accumulates slowly, the missed opportunities are often significantly delayed and feel much less real or tangible in the present moment.
This temporal mismatch, this disconnect between immediate gratification and delayed consequence, is absolutely central to why bad habits are so tenacious. Our brain's primitive programming gives immense weight to immediate positive feedback. It's incredibly difficult for an abstract future negative to compete with that potent instant hit of pleasure or relief in the moment of decision.
And just how pervasive are these automatic behaviors? The material includes a truly compelling statistic, citing research suggesting that somewhere around 40 to 50% of our daily actions are driven by habit.
Wow. Let that number sink in for a moment. Nearly half of what you do each day is likely happening on autopilot, guided by ingrained routines rather than conscious, deliberate choices you're making in that moment.
This sheer ubiquity of habits in our lives underscores their power and helps explain just how challenging it is to initiate and sustain change. The way we manage our stress, interact with our families, spend our free time, handle our work, these habitual patterns, often operating below our conscious radar, are profoundly shaping our identities and ultimately our life outcomes in ways we might not even fully appreciate.
To really understand the depth of this, we need to delve into the brain itself. The material provides a fascinating glimpse into the neuroscience underlying habit formation and why it's so deeply wired.
This takes us back to the basal ganglia. As we mentioned, these are structures deep within the brain, sometimes referred to as the habit hub. Their primary function is to learn, store, and execute automatic sequences of behavior. They are brilliant at recognizing patterns and automating actions, freeing up other parts of the brain.
The process described is that with repetition, whenever you perform a specific action and respond to a cue and receive a reward, the neural connections within the basal ganglia that link that cue, routine, and reward get stronger.
Think of it like paving a road. The more times you travel that particular cue routine reward sequence, the more smoothly and easily the signal travels along that specific neural pathway. It becomes a well-worn, efficient route. Eventually, this pathway becomes so robust that the behavior can be initiated with very little input from the parts of your brain responsible for deliberate thought. Your brain just follows the path of least resistance.
The material often references a classic study from MIT involving rats navigating a maze. This research was pivotal in pinpointing the basal ganglia's role.
Yes, in that study, researchers observed brain activity as rats learned to run a maze to get a chocolate reward. Initially, when the rats were figuring out the route, activity was high in the prefrontal cortex, the part involved in learning and conscious problem solving. But as the rats practiced the maze and the route became automatic, activity in the prefrontal cortex decreased significantly, while activity spiked in the basal ganglia.
That striking shift in activity demonstrated the behavior moving from a conscious effort to an automatic habit. And what's particularly telling is that once the habit was formed, the rats could run the maze quickly and efficiently, even if researchers introduced distractions. This perfectly mirrors how humans can perform a habit like driving to work, even while their mind is completely occupied with something else.
It vividly illustrates how the basal ganglia take over, making the behavior incredibly smooth and efficient, but also, by design, less accessible to conscious override once the automatic program is running.
And what provides the fuel, the motivation for strengthening these neural pathways? The material points to another key player in the brain, dopamine.
Dopamine. It's widely known as the feel-good neurotransmitter, but its role in habits is more accurately described as the make this happen again signal. Dopamine is critical for reinforcement. When an action is followed by a reward, dopamine is released, and it essentially tags that action as something valuable, something worth repeating. It floods the brain's reward centers, creating a pleasurable association that strengthens the link between the cue and the routine.
And the material highlights that dopamine's effect is particularly powerful, often addictively so, in the context of bad habits, precisely because the rewards are frequently immediate and intense.
Absolutely. Consider nicotine or sugar. They cause a very rapid and potent release of dopamine. That immediate, strong signal creates an incredibly compelling reinforcement loop. Your brain quickly learns that this specific behavior, lighting a cigarette, eating the donut, leads to a powerful positive feeling, making you crave it the next time you encounter the cue, stress, seeing the treat.
This dopamine system isn't inherently bad, of course. It evolved to encourage us to seek out things vital for survival, like food, water, and social connection.
But in our modern environment, with an abundance of highly concentrated, easily accessible rewards, hyper-palatable junk food, the endless novelty of social media notifications, addictive substances, this system can be easily hijacked. Bad habits excel at exploiting this circuit, making them feel incredibly compelling, sometimes almost essential, even when our conscious brain knows they are detrimental.
So we have the automatic drive from the basal ganglia, reinforced by dopamine. But surely our conscious mind, the part that wants to be healthy or productive, has a say. This is where the material brings back the prefrontal cortex, our brain's executive control center.
Right. The prefrontal cortex sits at the front of the brain and is responsible for higher-level functions like planning, setting goals, making deliberate decisions, and perhaps, most importantly in this context, inhibiting impulses and overriding automatic responses. This is the part of your brain that can look at the cue, for example, seeing the notification, and the habitual routine, reaching for the phone, and say, no, I'm working on this important task right now, I will resist that urge.
But here is the absolutely critical caveat that the research underscores. The prefrontal cortex's ability to effectively regulate behavior and resist those powerful automatic impulses is highly dependent on its current state. It performs optimally only under, optimal conditions.
Exactly. When you are well-rested, adequately nourished, not under excessive stress, and have sufficient mental energy when your cognitive load is low, your prefrontal cortex has the strength to exert control and make deliberate choices that align with your long-term goals, even if it means overriding a strong habit.
However, its capacity for self-regulation and impulse control significantly weakens when you are stressed, fatigued, hungry, overwhelmed, or have been making a lot of decisions already. That ego depletion we mentioned. This is precisely why we are so much more vulnerable to falling back into bad habits at the end of a long, draining day or during periods of intense pressure.
It's the constant tug-of-war described in the material. The powerful, automatic pull of the basal ganglia-driven habit versus the deliberate control capacity of the prefrontal cortex. And when the prefrontal cortex is depleted, automaticity frequently wins, leading us back to those familiar, often regretted routines.
Despite all this ingrained wiring and the power of automaticity, the material offers a powerful message of hope through the concept of neuroplasticity.
Absolutely. Neuroplasticity is the brain's astonishing ability to reorganize itself, to form new neural connections throughout life. This is the biological foundation that makes change possible.
The research explains that by consistently practicing new behaviors, especially those that replace old habits, you're actually building and strengthening new neural pathways in your brain. At the same time, as you refrain from the old behavior, the neural pathways associated with the bad habit gradually weaken.
Take the example of someone replacing smoking with chewing gum in response to stress. Every time they choose the gum instead of the cigarette, they are reinforcing a new neural pathway connecting the stress cue to the chewing gum routine and its associated reward. Simultaneously, the old stress to smoking pathway, deprived of reinforcement, begins to prune away.
However, the material is very realistic about the process. Neuroplasticity takes time and consistent effort. You're not erasing the old pathway instantly. You're essentially forging a new parallel path while allowing the old one to become overgrown, so to speak. Building that new strong path requires persistent work, often weeks or months of deliberate practice. It's not an overnight transformation.
And a key challenge, as the material notes, is that the old, established pathway associated with the bad habit doesn't necessarily disappear entirely, even if it weakens significantly. It remains a latent vulnerability. This is a core reason why relapse is a constant possibility, even for someone who has successfully broken a habit for a long time. Under periods of high stress or returning to old environments, that old pathway can be reactivated, making it feel like an uphill battle to stay on the new course.
Speaking of environments, the material strongly emphasizes the crucial role of memory and context in triggering habits. Our behaviors aren't just internal programs, they are powerfully tied to specific external environments and situations.
This is the concept of context dependency. Your brain forms strong associations between particular surroundings or moments in time and specific behaviors. For instance, the simple act of sitting on a particular couch in your living room might be strongly linked to the habit of reaching for a snack or turning on the TV. The couch itself becomes a cue.
Yes, the research shows the brain stores these habit memories right alongside the environmental cues that were present when the habit was performed and rewarded. This explains why it can feel incredibly difficult to break certain habits when you're in your usual environment where those cues are everywhere. They automatically activate the habit pathway.
The material suggests that a powerful, albeit sometimes disruptive, strategy for changing habits can be changing your environment or routine significantly. Moving to a new place, starting a new job, or even just changing the typical sequence of your day can disrupt these ingrained cue behavior links, providing a valuable window for establishing new patterns.
But be aware of the flip side. The material warns that returning to an old environment or context where a bad habit was prevalent, perhaps visiting the hometown where you used to smoke heavily with certain friends, or going back to a place associated with unhealthy eating, can powerfully reactivate those dormant habit pathways, making relapse much more likely, even years down the line. The old environmental cues are still potent triggers.
Beyond the biological wiring and environmental influences, there are also significant psychological barriers that contribute mightily to the struggle of breaking bad habits. The material delves into several of these, highlighting the complex inner landscape we navigate.
One of the most pervasive is the power of instant gratification, sometimes referred to as temporal discounting.
Right. This is our deeply ingrained human tendency to place a much higher value on rewards that are available immediately compared to rewards that are delayed, even if the delayed reward is objectively much larger or more beneficial in the long run.
Think about choosing the immediate pleasure and comfort of eating an entire pint of ice cream right now versus the abstract, distant future benefits of weight loss, improved health, or fitting into clothes better, which might take weeks or months of consistent healthy eating.
The material explains that this bias has deep evolutionary roots in the past. Securing immediate food or shelter was often critical for survival, while future planning was less certain. But in the modern world, where instant rewards are abundant and aggressively marketed, this preference can seriously derail our long-term well-being, making bad habits incredibly appealing in the moment.
Habits like gambling, impulse shopping, consuming sugary foods, or engaging in excessive social media provide rapid bursts of pleasure or temporary relief. The benefits of quitting financial security, better physical health, increased focus are often much less vivid, less tangible, and delayed.
Overcoming this temporal mismatch requires a deliberate effort to shift your perspective, learning to vividly imagine and place a higher value on those future gains. And as the material acknowledges, that requires conscious effort against a very strong biological tide.
Then there are those subtle but powerful cognitive biases, essentially systematic ways our thinking gets skewed that actively work to keep us stuck in our habits. The material outlines several key ones.
First, the status quo bias. We possess a strong inherent preference for maintaining things as they are, for sticking with familiar routines, even when we intellectually know those routines are harmful. Change feels uncertain, uncomfortable, and requires effort, so the default is often to just keep doing what we've always done simply because it's known. The example is someone continuing to smoke not necessarily because they enjoy it intensely anymore, but because it's a deeply ingrained, predictable part of their daily structure, and the thought of disrupting that feels destabilizing, despite knowing the severe health risks.
There's also the optimism bias. This is our tendency to believe that negative outcomes are less likely to happen to us than to others. We might underestimate the difficulty of breaking a habit. Oh, quitting smoking will be easy for me when I decide to. Or we might downplay the severity of the consequences. Yeah, smoking is bad, but probably won't get cancer. This overconfidence can prevent us from taking the habits hold seriously or from preparing adequately for the difficulty of changing, leading to repeated failed attempts.
Another is confirmation bias. Once a habit is established, especially if it provides some comfort or perceived benefit, we tend to seek out, notice, and remember information that confirms our existing beliefs or justifies our behavior, while conveniently ignoring or downplaying evidence that contradicts it or highlights the harm. A compulsive shopper might focus intensely on the thrill of finding a bargain or the temporary lift in mood from buying something new, while mentally blocking out the growing credit card debt or the clutter accumulating at home. They look for reasons why the habit is okay.
And finally, the sunk cost fallacy. This bias convinces us to continue a course of action, even a harmful one, simply because we've already invested significant time, money, or effort into it. This is seen in gambling addiction, where someone might continue to gamble large sums not because they are winning, but because they have already lost so much and feel compelled to keep playing in the desperate hope of winning back their losses, doubling down on a losing strategy.
The material underscores that these biases create powerful blind spots in our thinking. They actively distort our perception of our habits, making them seem less harmful, easier to control, or more justified than they truly are. This makes it incredibly difficult to even build the initial motivation or recognize the true urgency needed to break free. They keep us locked into faulty reasoning that supports the status quo.
A profoundly important psychological factor the material highlights is how many bad habits function as coping mechanisms for difficult emotions.
This is absolutely key. Feelings like stress, anxiety, boredom, loneliness, sadness, frustration, or anger are incredibly powerful internal cues. They often trigger habitual behaviors that provide a temporary escape, distraction, or form of self-soothing, even if those behaviors are ultimately harmful.
Someone might reach for a cigarette or alcohol, specifically when they feel stressed to try and calm their nerves. Another person might fall into a deep rabbit hole of mindless social media scrolling when they feel bored or lonely, using the constant feed as a distraction from discomfort. Procrastination is often a way to avoid the anxiety associated with potential failure or judgment on a difficult task.
And the material makes a crucial point that resonates deeply. For these types of habits, simply trying to eliminate the behavior itself without addressing the underlying emotional root that is triggering it is often ineffective in the long term.
Right. If someone uses overeating to cope with loneliness, the true problem isn't just the eating, it's the loneliness. Successfully changing that habit might require finding healthier ways to connect with people, or learning different strategies to cope with feeling alone, such as journaling, pursuing a meaningful hobby, or engaging in physical activity.
Without addressing that core emotional need or learning alternative, healthier coping strategies, the brain, which is seeking relief from discomfort, will simply try to find other habitual ways to fulfill that same purpose. You might stop stress eating, but then find yourself stress shopping or excessive gaming if the underlying stress trigger isn't managed differently.
Our habits are also deeply intertwined with our sense of who we are, our identity. The material notes this can serve as both a significant barrier and, if approached differently, a powerful leverage point for change.
If someone has identified themselves for years as a smoker, a night owl and procrastinator, or someone who struggles with their weight, that label becomes part of their self-concept. For them, breaking the associated habit isn't just about changing an action. It can feel like shedding a part of their identity. This can be profoundly uncomfortable and daunting, a kind of loss of the familiar self, even if that self-concept is tied to harmful behaviors.
The internal dialogue can be powerful. If I stop smoking, who am I? All my friends smoke. It's part of how I socialize. It's just me. This feeling of losing a familiar identity can create subconscious resistance to change.
However, the material also points to a compelling counter-strategy, often discussed in habit literature, which is to focus on building an identity that aligns with the desired habits. Instead of framing the goal as simply stopping a bad habit, you frame it around becoming the kind of person who doesn't engage in that habit, or the kind of person who engages in the desired good habit.
Instead of saying, I want to stop procrastinating, the identity-based approach is, I am the kind of person who is productive and gets things done.
Yeah.
Instead of, I need to eat healthier, it's, I am a healthy eater, or I am an active person. This subtle but significant shift in focus makes the desired behaviors feel less like a chore you have to do and more like natural expressions of who you are becoming. It aligns your actions with your desired self-image, making them feel more intuitive and sustainable.
One common, yet often misleading belief about breaking bad habits is that the key ingredient is simply motivation. The material touches on this, describing it as the paradox of motivation.
We often hear or think, if only I were more motivated, I could finally quit X, or I'm just waiting for the motivation to hit. But the research indicates that motivation, while helpful in initiating action, is an incredibly fickle and unreliable force for sustained change.
Motivation is highly transient. It fluctuates wildly depending on your mood, how much sleep you got, your stress levels, and external circumstances. Relying solely on surges of motivation to power you through the difficult process of habit change is, frankly, unsustainable. Many people feel a burst of motivation, start strong, but then when the initial enthusiasm inevitably fades, they lose momentum and fall back into old patterns.
So, the material suggests that successful, long-term habit change relies less on summoning bursts of willpower or waiting for motivation to strike, and much more on building consistent, reliable systems and routines. It's about structuring your environment and your approach so that the desired behavior is the easiest path, and the undesired behavior requires effort, regardless of how motivated you feel in the moment.
Shifting our focus outwards, it's clear our environment and social context play enormous roles in shaping and maintaining our habits. The material strongly emphasizes the power of environmental cues.
This connects back to the cue part of the habit loop, but specifically focuses on how external triggers in our surroundings can automatically set off a chain reaction leading to a habit. The material uses striking examples. Simply having a bowl of candy on your desk cues mindless eating. Seeing your smartphone charging right next to your bed cues late-night scrolling. Walking past the vending machine cues buying a sugary drink.
These cues are often so integrated into the background of our daily lives that we might not even consciously register them, yet they exert a powerful, almost invisible influence, automatically activating those habit pathways in our brains.
This insight leads to a very practical and powerful strategy discussed in the material. Actively modifying your environment to support change. This can be as simple as removing triggers entirely, getting junk food out of the house, putting your phone away in a different room during work or bedtime. These steps increase the friction required to perform the bad habit, making it harder to start.
Conversely, you can design your environment to make good habits easier. Laying out your workout clothes the night before, putting a book you want to read prominently on your coffee table, or having healthy snacks prepped and visible in the fridge. These steps decrease the friction for the desired behavior and add helpful cues that prompt positive action. It's about making the path of desired behavior the clear and easy one.
And we are not just individuals operating in a vacuum. Our habits are significantly influenced by the people around us. The material delves into the impact of social norms and peer influence.
As social creatures, we are hardwired to connect with and conform to the groups we belong to. If your close friends, family members, or colleagues regularly engage in certain habits, smoking, excessive drinking, overeating, or even complaining frequently, it creates a powerful social environment that normalizes and encourages those behaviors.
There can be subtle or even overt social pressure to join in, to fit in, or a fear of standing out or potentially jeopardizing social connections by deviating from the group's norms. The classic example highlighted is someone trying to quit drinking when their entire social life revolves around meeting friends at bars. It's not just about resisting alcohol, it's about navigating complex social dynamics.
However, this same principle can be leveraged for good. The material points out that building or joining a supportive social network is one of the most powerful catalysts for positive change. Sharing your goals with a trusted friend, joining a support group for a specific habit, like AA or a smoking cessation group, or participating in a fitness class or club provides accountability, encouragement, and a sense of shared purpose that can make the journey much less daunting and significantly increase your chances of success.
Beyond our immediate social circles, broader cultural narratives and media also shape our perceptions and habits, often in subtle but powerful ways.
The material discusses how advertising and media can subtly glamorize or normalize certain habits. Think of commercials for fast food that emphasize speed and pleasure, alcohol ads that link drinking to fun and social connection, or even depictions in movies and TV shows where certain habits are portrayed as normal or even desirable parts of life.
Constant exposure to these messages, coupled with societal acceptance of certain behaviors, can subtly erode our resolve to change and make negative habits seem less problematic. The widespread normalization of excessive screen time in our digital culture, for example, makes it harder for individuals to recognize and curb their own problematic phone use. It's just seen as what everyone does.
Broader cultural values also play a role. Cultures that emphasize constant productivity might inadvertently reinforce habits like chronic overworking or neglecting self-care. Societies with strong traditions around food might make changing eating habits more culturally sensitive. Recognizing these larger forces is essential for understanding the complex web of influences supporting our habits.
And speaking of cultural forces, technology has fundamentally reshaped the landscape of habits, presenting both incredible tools for positive change and potent new avenues for harmful habits.
It truly is a double-edged sword. On one hand, technology offers fantastic resources to support breaking bad habits. Apps and wearable devices can provide objective tracking, send helpful reminders, connect you with supportive online communities, or even gamify the process, making it more engaging.
But on the other hand, and perhaps more insidiously, a vast amount of modern technology is explicitly designed to exploit our habit loops and keep us hooked, particularly social media platforms. These are engineered to deliver variable rewards, likes, comments, new content, on an unpredictable schedule, which is one of the most powerful ways to create compulsive, habitual behavior. The endless scroll, notifications, algorithmically curated content, all designed to trigger and reward constant engagement.
The accessibility that technology provides also amplifies other potential bad habits. Online shopping makes impulsive buying easier than ever. Food delivery apps reduce the effort required for unhealthy eating. Streaming services facilitate binge watching.
Breaking habits reinforced by technology requires not only traditional strategies, but also intentional digital boundaries. The materials suggest practical steps, like setting strict screen time limits, disabling distracting notifications, or physically moving devices away from you during periods you want to be focused or disconnected. You have to actively manage the technology, or it will very efficiently manage your habits.
Beyond these biological, psychological, and environmental factors, there are also very practical day-to-day challenges that commonly trip people up when they attempt to break bad habits. The material outlines several frequent roadblocks.
One of the most fundamental is simply lacking clear goals. People often have vague intentions like, I want to be healthier, or I need to stop spending so much money.
And as the research makes clear, without a specific, concrete plan detailing what you will do, when, and how, these intentions are incredibly difficult to translate into action. There's no clear path forward, and it's easy for the old automatic routines to just take over.
The material highlights the value of frameworks like SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Instead of a vague intention, a SMART goal might be, I will pack a healthy lunch from home 4 days a week for the next month to save money and eat better. That's something actionable you can track.
Another major practical obstacle, one we've touched on, is over-reliance on willpower.
We tend to view willpower as this bottomless well of discipline we can just tap into whenever we need it. But as the research on ego depletion shows, willpower is a finite resource. It gets used up throughout the day by decision-making, resisting impulses, managing stress.
Relying solely on raw willpower to fight off a deeply ingrained automatic habit is a strategy destined for exhaustion and eventual failure. Your willpower will eventually run out, and the automatic habit will be waiting to take over.
Successful change, the material strongly argues, comes not from having infinite willpower, but from creating systems and structures that reduce the amount of willpower required. This involves automating decisions, like preparing things in advance, removing temptations, reducing the need to resist, and building routines that make the desired behavior the default. It's about making the environment work for you, not against you.
A very common and destructive mindset that hinders habit change is the all-or-nothing approach.
This is where individuals aim for perfect compliance and view any small slip-up or deviation as a catastrophic failure that invalidates all their progress. The classic scenario is someone trying to eat healthily who eats one piece of cake at a party and immediately thinks, well, I've ruined everything now, leading them to abandon their healthy eating efforts entirely for days or weeks.
The material rightly points out how counterproductive this mindset is. Habit change is fundamentally a process, not a single event of instant perfection. Setbacks are almost guaranteed to happen. They are part of being human and part of the learning curve.
Embracing a more flexible, growth-oriented mindset is crucial. This involves viewing setbacks not as evidence of personal failure, I'm just weak lazy, but as valuable information. Okay, what triggered that? What can I learn? How can I handle that differently next time? This perspective fosters resilience and allows you to quickly recover from slip-ups and get back on track without derailing everything.
Another practical hurdle is the lack of immediate feedback, particularly with bad habits.
Often, the most severe consequences of harmful habits are delayed by months or even years. The lung damage from smoking doesn't appear after one cigarette. It builds over decades. The significant debt from compulsive shopping accumulates gradually. And on the flip side, the benefits of breaking a bad habit or starting a good one also take time to become apparent. You don't feel dramatically healthier after one workout or financially secure after saving a small amount once.
This lack of immediate positive feedback for the effort invested in changing makes it incredibly difficult to stay motivated, especially in the early stages when the old habit is still tempting and the rewards of the new behavior feel distant or intangible.
The materials suggest a key strategy to counter this: actively creating your own short-term rewards and tracking mechanisms. This could mean using an app to visually track streaks, giving yourself a small, non-habit-related reward when you hit a goal, or simply keeping a journal to note the small positive feelings you experience immediately after choosing the healthier path. These strategies help bridge that gap and provide the brain with reinforcing feedback in the present moment.
Finally, the sheer complexity of dealing with multiple entrenched bad habits simultaneously is a major practical challenge that often leads to feeling overwhelmed.
Many people don't struggle with just one thing. They might be trying to quit smoking, reduce sugar, start exercising, and stop procrastinating all at once. Attempting to tackle all of these head-on simultaneously is often a recipe for burnout and failure.
The material advocates for a more strategic approach, focusing on one habit at a time. And if possible, starting with the habit that seems to have the most significant negative impact, or, alternatively, the one that might have a positive ripple effect on other areas.
For example, deciding to focus intensely on managing stress through healthier coping mechanisms might, as a positive side effect, reduce the need for stress-related comfort eating or procrastination, making it easier to address those habits later. Successfully changing one keystone habit can build confidence and create momentum that makes tackling the next one feel less daunting.
So given this complex landscape of biology, psychology, environment, and practical roadblocks, what are the actionable strategies we can employ to actually succeed? The material offers several evidence-based approaches for, as it puts it, rewriting the script.
One of the most effective strategies, and one that smartly leverages the cue routine reward loop, is habit replacement.
The core idea here is that instead of just trying to eliminate a routine, you identify the cue and the reward the bad habit fulfills, and then substitute a different, healthier routine that still provides a similar reward or satisfies the same underlying need. If stress cues smoking for calm, maybe replace lighting up with deep breathing, chewing gum, a quick walk, or stepping outside.
You're still responding to the trigger and seeking a desired outcome, stress relief, calm, but you're substituting a behavior that's aligned with your long-term goals. It works because you're redirecting the existing pathway, not fighting the whole loop from scratch.
There's also the tactical question of how to approach the change. Gradual modification versus quitting cold turkey.
The material notes that the optimal strategy here really depends on the specific habit and the individual. For certain highly addictive habits, like heavy smoking or significant alcohol dependence, cold turkey, often with support, might be necessary.
However, for many other habits, particularly lifestyle ones like overeating, procrastination, or screen time, a gradual, incremental approach can be much more sustainable and less overwhelming. This might involve setting small goals, like reducing portion sizes slightly, committing to just 25 minutes of focused work, or setting timers for social media and gradually decreasing the time.
The material suggests that for complex habits, gradual change is often more effective because it allows you to build confidence with small successes and avoid that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Environmental design, which we touched on earlier, is presented as a powerful, proactive strategy.
Right. You are actively shaping your surroundings to make the desired behavior easier and the undesired behavior harder. Remove triggers. Place cues for good habits, running shoes by the door, water bottle on the desk. Add friction to bad habits, phone in a drawer, unhealthy food out of sight.
The goal is to create an environment where the path of least resistance leads you towards your goals. It makes it require more effort to engage in the bad habit than the good one.
Leveraging technology, when used mindfully, is another tool.
Habit tracking apps, timers, website blockers, wearables, they can provide structure, data, reminders, and even a sense of gamified progress, which can be motivating. Seeing progress charted out is reinforcing.
However, as we discussed, it's crucial to be intentional. Technology can also reinforce bad habits. So using it as a tool requires conscious effort to ensure it supports your goals, not get you further entangled.
Building and utilizing a strong support system is consistently highlighted as critical.
Accountability is a huge motivator. Sharing goals with a friend, family, partner, or joining a formal support group provides external accountability that helps you stay on track, especially when internal motivation wavers.
Having people to talk to about struggles, celebrate successes with, and who offer encouragement is invaluable. Whether it's a formal group like AA, a therapist, coach, or just a friend you check in with, that sense of not being alone provides significant strength.
The practice of mindfulness and cultivating self-awareness is presented as a way to directly counter the automaticity driving habits.
Yes, mindfulness is about paying attention to the present moment without judgment. By practicing techniques like meditation or just pausing before reacting, you can become more aware of the cues, urges, and thoughts before the automatic habit takes over.
This increased self-awareness creates a small but crucial space between the cue and the routine. In that space, you have the opportunity to make a conscious choice instead of defaulting. The material uses mindful eating as an example, actively paying attention to hunger, taste, fullness, rather than just mindlessly consuming.
Since habits are deeply tied to the reward system, another strategy involves reward substitution.
This involves identifying the specific reward the bad habit is fulfilling. Escape, connection, pleasure, relief, and finding a healthier alternative that provides a similar reward or meets that same need. If social media scrolling provides connection, maybe substitute it with calling a friend or engaging in a fun hobby.
The key is that the substitute reward needs to be genuinely satisfying enough to compete with the old habit's reward, and it must, crucially, be aligned with your long-term goals.
Finally, the material emphasizes the incredible power of focusing on and celebrating small wins.
Habit change is often a long process. It can feel discouraging if you only focus on the distant end goal. Starting with incredibly small, manageable actions, sometimes called tiny habits, builds momentum and confidence. This could be doing one push-up, flossing one tooth, reading one page.
The material highlights that consistently achieving these small actions builds a sense of capability and reinforces the identity of someone who sticks to things. Over time, these tiny efforts compound. Actively acknowledging and celebrating these small wins, even internally, helps provide that necessary positive reinforcement to keep you motivated.
As we navigate these challenges and strategies, the material introduces a critical element that often makes or breaks success: cultivating self-compassion.
Why is this so important? Because, as we've seen, breaking bad habits is inherently difficult. Setbacks, slip-ups, failures are almost inevitable, and when they happen, our automatic response is often intense self-criticism, guilt, and shame.
That harsh inner voice, "You messed up again, you have no discipline, why try?" is incredibly demotivating. It increases stress and negative emotions, which, as we discussed, are often triggers for the bad habits themselves. It creates a vicious cycle.
Self-compassion, in contrast, means treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a good friend who was struggling, especially during moments of difficulty or failure. It involves acknowledging your struggle without harsh judgment.
Research by experts like Dr. Kristen Neff suggests self-compassion is not only good for emotional well-being, but is actually powerful fuel for persistence and resilience. People who practice it are more likely to pick themselves up after a setback and try again, because they don't get trapped in paralyzing shame.
Instead of thinking, "I ate the cookie, I'm a total failure," a self-compassionate response is more like, "Okay, that was hard. I'm struggling, which is normal. What can I learn? How can I get back on track?" It reframes setbacks as learning opportunities.
The material outlines the core components: self-kindness, being warm to yourself; common humanity, recognizing struggle is universal; and mindfulness, observing painful thoughts without judgment.
Practical ways include changing self-talk to be supportive, journaling with understanding, practicing forgiveness for past failures, and using mindfulness to stay grounded when triggered.
Integrating self-compassion isn't about being soft or letting yourself off the hook. The material clarifies this distinction from self-indulgence.
Self-compassion involves accountability, but from a place of kindness. It's acknowledging the slip-up, understanding why it happened, learning from it, and making a conscious decision to move forward with renewed intention. It's not an excuse for the behavior, but a supportive mindset for the process.
To illustrate how these concepts play out, the material provides summaries of various case studies showing individuals successfully navigating their challenges.
There's John, the smoker, triggered by stress. His success involved analyzing his loop, replacing smoking with gum breathing, modifying his environment, avoiding smoke breaks, and finding a support group.
Another is Sarah, the procrastinator, linked to perfectionism anxiety. Her path involved breaking tasks down small, short-term rewards and actively cultivating self-compassion to counter negative self-judgment.
We also see Emma, challenged by screen time triggered by boredom. She used environmental design, phone outside bedroom blockers, and replaced scrolling with reading journaling.
And Michael, struggling with overeating triggered by stress emotions. His journey involved therapy for emotional roots, mindful eating, changing his home environment, removing trigger foods, and finding healthier coping mechanisms like exercise.
These brief examples underscore the key message. While habits are complex, change is possible by understanding your own dynamics and applying these strategies with patience and persistence.
Looking at the long-term view, the material stresses that successfully changing a habit isn't typically a one-time event that's completed and then forgotten.
The risk of relapse is a reality. Those old neural pathways remain. High stress, old environments, or emotional challenges can reactivate them, sometimes years later.
A former smoker might get intense cravings during a crisis. Someone who overcame comfort eating might reach for it again during grief. The material highlights that ongoing awareness and maintenance strategies are crucial self-reflection, managing cues, maintaining support systems.
It's about building a habit change mindset that acknowledges this ongoing journey, a process of continuous growth, adaptation, learning from setbacks. This mindset embraces flexibility, understands progress isn't linear. It frames change as a journey you refine.
And finally, the material beautifully touches on the powerful ripple effect that breaking a key habit can have.
Successfully changing one pattern often creates positive momentum that spills over. Quitting smoking leads to better health, might make exercise feel more possible, which boosts mood and energy, impacting productivity and relationships.
It shows how intentional change in one area can genuinely transform multiple aspects of life due to the interconnectedness of our habits and well-being.
So to bring this deep dive to a close, the struggle to break bad habits is a profoundly human experience. It's not a sign of weakness. It's rooted in brain wiring, psychology, environment, and society.
Our brains, evolved for efficiency and drawn to immediate rewards, make those automatic, often unhelpful behaviors incredibly difficult to disrupt by conscious will alone.
And as we've explored, we face numerous internal and external barriers. Cognitive biases, emotional coping, environmental pulls, social pressures, and practical challenges like vague goals or relying on finite willpower.
But the powerful message woven throughout this material is that while these forces are formidable, they are not insurmountable. By understanding why habits are sticky, analyzing our own loops, and actively employing strategies, replacement, environment design, self-compassion, support networks, we absolutely can overcome these obstacles.
It's reinforced that the path isn't about instant perfection, but consistent, imperfect progress. Becoming more aware of triggers, finding healthier ways to meet needs, and building resilience to navigate slip-ups without giving up.
The case studies serve as compelling illustrations that change is within reach, even with habits that feel deeply entrenched or part of your identity.
By approaching habit change with patience, intentionality, and that crucial element of self-kindness, we gain the power to, as the material suggests, rewrite the scripts of our lives, choosing paths that lead us closer to the future we truly desire, one step at a time.
The core, thought-provoking idea this deep dive leaves us with is this. The journey of grappling with and changing our habits is ultimately a testament to our incredible capacity for growth and transformation. While our brains are profoundly wired for habit, they are also fundamentally capable of change.
And with the right knowledge, the right tools applied consistently, and the right mindset that embraces both challenge and self-compassion, we can indeed break free from the patterns that hold us back and actively build a life that aligns more closely with our deepest values and aspirations. That was a truly insightful journey into a topic that resonates with everyone. Thanks for exploring it with us.
It's a powerful reminder that understanding the intricate why behind the struggle is the essential first step toward discovering the effective how of sustainable change.
And if you found this deep dive helpful and informative, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.